5 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few quarterbacks I looked at on the wire this week. The first guy, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. So Jared Goff, he's off to a monster start so far this season here, and he's really surprising, especially in week 4 without Amon St. Brown and B.J. Chark, some of his top targets. Obviously, St. Brown being his top target this season, but he's gone out there and he's playing great football as Goff. So right now, this will probably be the last chance for fantasy owners to go out there and get him. He's only available in 48% of leagues. So the last few weeks here for Goff, week 2 versus Washington, 256 pass yards, 4 touchdowns, -2 rushing. Week 3 at the Minnesota Vikings, 277 pass yards, a touchdown, and 8 yards rushing. And then a wild ball game where the Lions just fell short, 48-45 in a classic shootout, 378 pass yards, 4 passing touchdowns, an 1 rush yard, and 2 two-point conversions, which were good for 41 fantasy points for Jared Goff. So right here, week 5, not the greatest of matchups in New England. And one thing with Jared Goff you notice is he plays great games at home. And so far in the one road game this season, he only had 16 fantasy points. So right here, he's a guy you got to pay attention to. He's within the top 5 in fantasy points for quarterbacks this season here. In week 5, I know it's a tough matchup in New England after they did a decent job versus Rodgers and the Packers in week 4 here. But week 5 in New England, then the bye week 6, tough matchup at Dallas. But I still think Jared Goff's a guy you got to consider and go out there and even though with the tough matchups, he's a guy putting up numbers and you can't deny it. Right now, the next guy, Geno Smith, was staying in the same game of the Seattle Seahawks. I mentioned Geno Smith as an ad last week, but I didn't think this week he would come in and go for 35 fantasy points, 320 pass yards, 2 touchdowns in week 4, 49 rush yards, and a rushing touchdown. So Geno Smith, we know he has solid weapons in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and Will Disley's been a favorite target of his as well. So the last couple weeks here for Geno, week 3 versus Atlanta, 325 pass yards in that one, with 2 touchdowns and an interception. Then the game at Detroit in week 4. And now week 5, not a great matchup in New Orleans. The Saints defense, they could cause havoc for opposing quarterbacks. And we saw they gave Kirk Cousins a tough time, even though the Vikings pulled it out at the end on a Will Lutz missing a 61-yard field goal. But anyway, here, Geno Smith's playing good football. He's got 3 solid targets in Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Will Disley. And I know it's not a great matchup, but it's an indoor game on the road, a game where I think they're going to throw, even though we saw Rashad Penny break out finally in this game here for Seattle. And right now, he's available in 88% of fantasy leagues. The next quarterback's Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. I'm not big on Tannehill, but I'm going off a matchup-based type of thing here in week 5 at the Washington football team, a team that really can't stop anyone. And if you're in a pinch for a quarterback big time, Tannehill's a decent spot start for next week and an add off the wire. Available in 83% of leagues. So the last few games here for Tannehill, week 3 versus Vegas, 264 pass yards, a touchdown, and 2 rush yards, a touchdown. And week 4 at Indianapolis, 137 pass yards, 2 touchdowns and 9 rushes. So him and Robert Woods, they're starting to get a good rapport. I know Traylon Burks, he got hurt in this ball game, but Westbrook-Ikhine, we've seen him over the years be decent as an option here for Ryan Tannehill. And just for a 1-week only thing, he's worth an ad that week 5 at Washington. And then week 6, he goes on a bye here as Ryan Tannehill. So right now, while this Titan team's wrote the ship over the last 2 games, winning the last 2 games and Tannehill playing decent football, I think he could go anywhere from 18 to 22 fantasy points in week 5, and he's a streaming option like I mentioned. And I got Ed on the wire this week. The next guy's Kenny Pickett of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers here, I think they're going to go to the youth movement now. I know we're only entering week 5, but it's getting late early right now for this Steelers team, 1-3 on the season. And Kenny Pickett came in the second half versus the New York Jets, and we saw some decent flashes from him and some bad things with the turnovers as well, with the Jets pulling out that ball game at the end. So Pickett, one of the top quarterbacks drafted in the NFL draft this season, even though there wasn't a lot of good prospects in the draft. The draft coming up is going to be loaded. But anyway, in week 4 versus the Jets, 120 pass yards, 3 interceptions, showed some versatility running the football with 15 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Week 5 at Buffalo, though, that's a ball game I'm not going to recommend, obviously, to play Pickett. But in deeper leagues, 2 quarterback leagues right now, or even a guy you want to take a flyer on and stash him on your bench, I think he's a decent guy to do that with. But the next couple weeks here is going to be tough to have Pickett on your team with Buffalo and Tampa Bay. But right now, he's a guy to recommend because he's a rookie, and he's got some weapons on that Steelers team that Mitchell Trubisky just couldn't use. They got Deontay Johnson. He's been up and down. Chase Claypool, he's been a train wreck this season. And George Pickens as well, even though we saw Pickens have a good ball game. And a guy I recommend as a pickup for the receiver videos when I get to that. But anyway, Kenny Pickett out there in 95% of fantasy leagues, and he's a quarterback I would add and stash on my bench right now. No way you're going to start him at Buffalo and Tampa the next 2 weeks, and the fifth and final quarterback I look to get on the wire this week's Teddy Bridgewater. Dolphins. So right now we saw Tua go out with that crazy head injury, and there's no timetable for his return, and rightfully so. So Bridgewater is going to be manning this offense for at least week 5 and week 6 here for this Dolphin team, I imagine. And right here, week 5, he's got a good matchup at the New York Jets. So as a streaming option, it's a great matchup at the New York Jets. And Bridgewater, he looked not great, but decent at Cincinnati, relieving Tua in the second quarter. 193 pass yards, a touchdown and into, and 11 rushing yards. So we know Bridgewater's been a journeyman throughout his career here. But right now, he's got a good offense around him with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Chase Edmonds, and Raheem Mostert, good speed, and Mike Gesicki. And right now, he's available in 98% of fantasy leagues. I know if you're desperate or you're a guy that streams quarterbacks, which at this point this season, the way things have gone, a lot of quarterbacks have inconsistent and not getting the job done. So if you stream guys, I wouldn't blame you. So right now, if you want to stream Bridgewater, he's got a plus matchup at the Jets here in week 5. And he's a guy to add on waivers. So that's a few quarterbacks I look to add on the wire here for week 5 of the fantasy football season.